We saw on page 7 and 8 the 3 core values required to have a relationship with God. On page 9, we'll start to look at the actions and attitudes required in a relationship with others. Without a relationship with God, your relationship with others will fail to reach its potential. We saw on page 8 in Colossians 3:12, since you have been chosen by God, who has given you this new kind of life, and because of his deep love and concern for you, you should practice tender-hearted mercy and kindness to others. Don't worry about making a good impression on them, but be ready to suffer quietly and patiently. We see a relationship with others starts with practicing tender-hearted mercy and kindness. We also find the final attitude and actions needed in a relationship, that of being ready to suffer quietly and patiently. Jesus continues in Matthew 5, the core values required when it comes to a relationship with others. Matthew 5:7 is that of merciful. Verse 8 is truthful. Verse 9 is peacemaker. And verse 10 is willing to suffer. We'll look at each of these core values. The values that affected our relationship with God are now the foundation for our relationship with others. Before you can have a meaningful relationship with others, Peter tells us in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Next, learn to put aside your own desires, so that you will become patient and godly, gladly letting God have his way with you. This will make possible the next step, which is for you to enjoy other people and to like them. And finally, you will grow to love them deeply. What are the 3 character qualities found in this verse? Put aside your own desire. Develop patience. Be humble, that is, letting God have his way with you. The building blocks that you use to create your present relationships with others needs to be examined. You may have to deconstruct your present thinking pattern and reassemble it according with God's core values. The foundation needs to be built on Matthew 22:37, to love the Lord with all your heart. On Matthew 5:7, that of being merciful and truthful in Matthew 5:8. Then in Matthew 5:9, that of being a peacemaker, followed by Matthew 5:10, that of willing to suffer. As one's thought process changes, we will see that one's attitude and action will affect the relationship that we have with others. We will first look at merciful, found in Matthew 5:7. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. What are some other words for the word mercy? The dictionary gives us the following list: forgiving, compassionate, pity, forbearing, lenient, humane, kind, soft-hearted, tender-hearted, gracious, sympathetic, liberal, tolerant, indulgent, generous, benevolent. I found it interesting that the first word in the list was forgiving. Matthew 6:15 says, "But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. For you to be shown mercy, you must do the same for others." We see in Proverbs 17:9, "Love forgets mistakes. Nagging about them parts the best of friends." We find in 1 Peter 4, verse 8, that we are to overlook minor faults. Jesus tells us in Matthew 7:12, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." Then Jesus goes on to say in Matthew 22:39, "Love your neighbor as yourself." It is your choice. The way you treat others is the way you will be treated. Why do we find merciful so hard to learn? David Osberger, in his book, Caring Enough to Confront, tells us, "Everyone senses instinctively the priceless nature of his own being. Self-rule is the natural man's love of self. The love of self is natural and originates in the mind. This is a stumbling block to a relationship with God and others. Everyone looks for recognition. To be rejected causes one to immediately become defensive. To be merciful requires you to see others as equal to yourself." The next core value that we find is that of pure heart in Matthew 5:8. It says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." A pure heart is one that is truthful. Do you remember what Jeremiah 17:9 said? Jeremiah 17:9 and 10 tells us, "The heart is the most deceitful thing there is and desperately wicked. No one can really know how bad it is. Only the Lord knows. He searches all hearts and examines deepest motives so that he can give to each person his right reward, according to his deeds, how he has lived." Ever asked the question, if the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, how can it be pure? Titus 1, verse 15 tells us, "A person who is pure of heart sees goodness and purity in everything. But a person whose own heart is evil and untrusting finds evil in everything. For his dirty mind and rebellious heart colors all he sees and hears." At this point, you need to ask the question, which kind of heart do you have? A pure heart or a rebellious heart? Those who have established a relationship with God have had their heart cleansed from sin through Jesus' blood on the cross, and their heart is now pure. We see that in James 4:8, where it says, "And when you draw close to God, God will draw close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and let your hearts be filled with God alone, to make them pure and true to Him." A pure heart is a truthful heart. The third core value is that of peacemaker, found in Matthew 5, verse 9. "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." The word peacemaker can have several meanings. One may think of the gun that won the West. It was called the Peacemaker. Or maybe you thought of the B-36 airplane called the Peacemaker. Maybe you were thinking of the people who won the Nobel Peace Prize. This verse in Matthew 5:9 is not about warring parties or weapons to control the peace. So what is the meaning in the Bible? Bible scholars tell us that the Greek word translated peacemaker is used in only one other place in the New Testament, Colossians 1, verse 20, where it says, "It was through what his Son did that God cleared a path for everyone to come to him, all things in heaven and on earth. For Christ's death on the cross has made peace with God for all by his blood." Jesus laid down his life to make peace between God and sinners, and when we carry this message of peace between God and others, we are peacemakers, telling others how to make peace with God. And the fourth core value is persecuted, found in Matthew 5, verse 10. "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Like Jesus, we must be willing to suffer when we follow his teaching. In 1 Corinthians 1, verse 18, Paul said, "I know very well how foolish it sounds for those who are lost, when they hear that Jesus died to save them. But we who are saved recognize this message as the very power of God." Then in Romans 8:17 we read, "And since we are his children, we will share his treasures, for all God gives to his Son Jesus is now ours too. But if we are to share his glory, we must also share his suffering." The next verse goes on to say, "Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will give us later." Persecution, rejection, suffering will happen, and God says, "Those that are persecuted for my name, theirs is the kingdom of heaven." How does it feel to be rejected? To be rejected causes one to immediately become defensive. We must learn to be merciful even when we are rejected and persecuted. These are the 7 core values that a Christian should have. They will influence your attitude and actions towards God and others. For an in-depth look at relationship management and the disrupted expectations that occur in a relationship, go to www.christianvisualarts.com and click on Relationship Management, Parts 1 through Parts 5. You must make a choice as to which building blocks you will use in your relationship with others: biblical values or world values. On page 10, we will look at the different levels of a relationship. To view the Notebook on Life series, visit us on the web at www.christianvisualarts.com.